everyone, Joey here, aka Chromatography, and today I'm going to be doing a sort of catch-up video. See, recently I've been hit by a barrage of different releases, tracks and albums and pieces of music that I've meant to talk about but haven't got around to talking about. And now it's December and it's going to be year-end list season soon, as well as decade-end list season. So I'm not sure how on earth I could review everything in its own proper video and do all of those lists as well. So in this video I'm just going to do some brief reviews of lots of different releases that have come out recently. And then I can get round to making the year-end lists and decade-end lists and make them as good as possible. So first I'm going to be talking about the new album from Coldplay titled Everyday Life. Now I have quite a big history with Coldplay. I've got all of their albums on CD, and while I haven't listened to all of them that much, in particular the album A Head Full of Dreams, I have a lot of strong memories associated with. I bought it really soon after it came out, very early on in my music collecting, and I listened to it a lot on my summer holiday that year to the Isles of Scilly. So yeah, there's a really kind of nice feeling associated with listening to Coldplay for me, with that album in particular. I mean, it's not my favourite. My favourite's probably Milo's I Lotto, probably due to the amazing production from Brian Eno and other people as well. But the point is, I was very excited about the announcement of a new Coldplay album. So what do we get with Everyday Life? Well, this thing's a 16-track album that's only about 50 minutes long, but it's billed as a double album in two halves, Sunrise and Sunset, which don't really have that distinctive sounds from each other, but I like the idea. A lot of the tracks on here are quite short, and it's a little bit hit and miss. There's quite a lot of sort of gospel-y tracks that I don't like very much, because they just sound like hymns and aren't all that interesting to me. God, I'm kind of fed up of hymns after going to a Christian primary school. But I have to say there were some really great moments on here for me, and I also really like the kind of chilled atmosphere of the album. Sort of thing that sounds like being on a nighttime drive. In terms of particular highlights for me, I really like the opener Sunrise, 2.5 minutes of pure orchestral strings that really sounds like the dawning of the album. And then I really liked the whole first stretch of 5 or so tracks on this thing. I mean, at that point, this album sounded like a 7.5 or an 8. There are some really peaceful and beautiful sounding tracks, like the luscious and soothing Church, which again includes some orchestral backing, and the really sweet Daddy, which is just piano and vocals for the whole 5 minutes. It's not all peaceful on this album though, there are some darker moments, like Trouble in Town, which starts with some menacing bass guitar, and eventually builds up to a soaring instrumental climax full of intense drumming, and then this sample of some guy shouting angry stuff with an unusual amount of swearing for a Coldplay track. And the almost 6-minute track Arabesque, which has a sort of stomping beat and this massive backing of brass that really propels it into the air. Doesn't really sound much like the rest of the album, but this is an amazing moment. Also Guns, which is one of the brief moments on the album, under 2 minutes, mostly made up of some simple, unsubtly political lines sung by Chris Martin, with, again, some swearing, except this time sung by the man himself, which I really thought I'd never hear. Coldplay always seemed so innocent. I guess people will also want me to talk about the big single from this album that's being played on the radio a lot, Orphans. I sort of liked this track when I heard it on the radio, but then I heard it in the context of the album, and it's okay. Just sort of a normal pop song. Not much to say about it. Also, I don't know how on earth Chris Martin could have sung that really high vocal line in the chorus without any pitching up. And then quite a lot of the album is just a little bit forgettable. There are a lot of tracks that are under 3 minutes, and like I said, a lot of hymns like the tracks Broken and When I Need a Friend. While I do like the sound of most of the album, it's a a little bit forgettable with a lot of moments. Feels like there's quite a lot of filler in this thing. This album's probably not something that I'm gonna remember a lot in general. The tracks range from, like I said, 7.5s and 8s to like 6s and 6.5s. So overall, if I just combine my feelings on all of the tracks on this thing and how it comes together as a whole, it's a 6.5. deadmau5 dropped 3 new tracks recently called SATRN, Coasted and Full, of varying quality, but SATRN's definitely my favourite. Starts out sort of ambient and then gradually builds into this insanely good melody, and while the initial drop doesn't sound that satisfying, it builds and just has this really massive futuristic feel to it. It's kind of euphoric to listen to. Reminds me of some of my favourite moments off album title Goes Here, which is one of my favourite albums from him. Coasted has a rather similar feel to SATRN, although it's a bit darker and heavier. Still has some really great synth lines in there, but not quite as good as SATRN. Full is darker still, and it's quite atonal, mostly made up of one repeating polymetric note. Nerdy show off. It's a little bit...
I'm filming for my YouTube channel, which nobody watches.
It's a little bit unoriginal for deadmau5. I don't know. Didn't really stick with me very much. I'm gonna give an 8 for SATRN, 7 for Coasted, and 6.5 for Full. On the topic of individual tracks, there have been 2 new mixes of Out of Control by the Chemical Brothers, one from the Chemical Brothers themselves, and another one by the Avalanches. Yeah, so the first one was this 21 Minutes of Madness mix, let's get that the right way up, which was released on their 20th anniversary edition of Surrender, and also on this limited 12-inch vinyl I've got, which I thought I'd never be able to get, but I just managed to nab one when they came back into stock after selling out on the first day. So this is number 1750 of 1999 ever made, because I guess the album was released in 1999, so yeah. I was just so, like, in awe at the fact that a 21-minute mix of this track existed. Like, that sounded like the best thing ever. And I have to admit, I was ever so slightly disappointed by this. There were parts of it that were really good, but it was a little bit too repetitive. It starts off sort of quite similar to the original, but then just goes off on this big detour where there are like vocals echoing out from ear to ear with loads of delay and reverb. It does a lot of building up and dropping, and I know it's probably something that's designed for DJs to use, hence the white label, but I do slightly hope for more of a sort of climactic track at its length. But actually, I've been making it sound like I like it a lot less than I do, because it is really fun to listen to, and there's some really great additions to the track that they made here. I'm actually going to give it a 7 out of 10. Also, something I forgot to say was that I filmed a reaction of this, or at least try to, but it was just like not interesting enough to post to YouTube because there wasn't all that much going on in the track at some points, and I wasn't saying much interesting. So yeah, that happened. And then the Avalanches remix. I mean, great to see that the Avalanches are still making music, honestly. They said that this was going to be followed up by some bigger piece inspired by Surrender. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but I'm hyped for that, whatever it is. But this mix, 4 minutes long, is very different to the original. I think they put it in its relative major key, so it sounds happy and Avalanches-y. And I love how this one sounds really sort of rosy. There's lots of vocal samples about surrendering to love as well, which is fitting. Probably not the best they could have done. It doesn't do all that much, but it sounds great, makes me happy, and it's the Avalanches, so I'm gonna give this one a 7.5 out of 10. By the way, on the topic of the Chemical Brothers, on the last day of November, I went to Banquet Records to try and get the Underworld Drift box set, but they didn't have it and it wasn't going to be in for a while, and they sort of made me think it was never going to be in at all, even though I just found out that they are going to get it in, but after Christmas, and I wanted it for Christmas after they said it wasn't there. So anyway, whatever. Basically, I decided to spend my money instead on tickets to see the Chemical Brothers, like really spontaneously, a few hours before the show was gonna start, and it was insane. It was amazing, like absolute spectacle. I can't even describe it. Yeah, I just wanted to add that in. Next up, DJ Shadow with Our Pathetic Age. Very subtle message there if you look at the title and the cover. If you know DJ Shadow, you probably know him best for his 1995 album Endtroducing, which was, I believe, the first album ever to be made completely from samples. It's not just an essential piece of electronic music, but also one of hip-hop music, as it borrows lots of its samples and styles from there. Afterwards, he sort of like switched between making electronic albums and hip-hop and rap albums. And on his new project, it's a double album with one half electronic and one half hip-hop. Well, the electronic side also sounds quite hip-hop-ish, but like, you know. Both halves were really satisfying and well-made listens. There's some really interesting moments on the first half of the album, like the absolutely insane and distorted Juggernaut, the sort of film track-ish track made of pianos and strings, Firestorm, bellish tuned percussion sounds and acoustic drums on Sling Blade. And then the rap album was sort of part fun, slightly cheesy rap tracks, and part darker rap tracks that make you think a bit more, and continue to talk along the lines of the main message of the album about like technology and people being antisocial. And then there's the title track, which doesn't fit into either of the two categories of electronic or rap, being an electronic tinged rock track really, with great vocals from Sam Herring. Yeah, this is a really great track. Other highlights on the rap album for me are probably Drone Warfare, Rocket Fuel, and Urgent Important, Please Read. And overall, I'd give this double album a light 7.5 out of 10. Sorry to keep adding these stupid little bits in, but I realised I didn't talk about any of the flaws of this album at all. So yeah, I just wanted to say the reason I didn't give it a higher score was because I'm a bit worried about how memorable it will be and how much it will stick out in his discography when he's already made so much similar music. And I also forgot to say how he hasn't made anything like Endtroducing since 1996, and it would be nice if he did something a bit similar again. Although, and maybe it would be best to just keep the classic the way it is. Madeon's got a new album called Good Faith. I absolutely loved the guy for his debut album Adventure. That was a great album. Just a thrill ride of awesome sunny melodies that just made me really happy. And it had this really well-produced punchy sound that carried throughout. This follow-up is sort of just a similar thing, but taking away the things that made it really great. I mean, there are some cool moments on here, like All My Friends, Be Fine, Hold Me Just Because, Borealis, are all good tracks. But overall, I don't really have that much to say about this album. It's just sort of decent EDM. And as pointed out by the Wonky Angle, this sort of feels like a debut, and then he goes on to do greater things afterwards. And if this was his debut, then I'd be hopeful for what he does next. But it's his second album after the amazing Adventure, so it slightly feels like he's going downhill, which isn't a good feeling. So I did like quite a lot of this album, but I've got to give it a 6 out of 10, just off of being disappointing. There's a new track called Adrift from Michal Menert. It made one of my absolute favourite albums of all time with Even If It Isn't Right in 2012, which was just a complete 1 hour and 40-minute odyssey through samples of really catchy vocal lines from old soul tracks, combined with punchy modern electronics and buzzing bass lines. This new track is supposed to be sort of based around someone stranded adrift at sea. It starts off mostly sounding like something from Even If It Isn't Right, which is a good thing. There are lots of sounds that really do sound like being drifting away. It's got a vocal sample that's like pitched down, not really saying anything, just like I do think there's actual like singing in the sample later on, but it's hard to hear what it's saying. Yeah, this sounds great already, and then all of a sudden at like 3 minutes, everything cuts out and this frantic synth line comes in, and then all of a sudden this sort of jazzy fast drumming. Oh my god, it's so good. It's like really playing to my taste in music, liking electronic music and jazz music. Yeah, this part of the track is incredible. Then at the end it switches up again with a sort of old brassy sample and electronics that sound like they're sort of breaking down. And then the track ends. This thing is incredible. I mean, it would be a highlight if it was on Even If It Isn't Right. I hope he continues to release new music, and I'm gonna give this a strong 8 out of 10. Next up, the new album from Liturgy, H.A.Q.Q. I admit I've never ever listened to a metal album in my entire life, even though I've listened to like hundreds upon hundreds of other pieces of music. It's a bit weird, so I decided to listen to this thing. I don't know if this is the best place to start in metal music at all. From what I can hear, it's quite experimental. I don't know if I'll be accepted very well in with the metal heads. Don't know if they'll make me go to Scandinavia and do weird like animal sacrifice rituals and bathe in blood and all the weird metal things that metal people do. Like violent stuff, you know, metal. Anyway, I have like no words to describe this thing. I mean, it was a really confrontational listen that did really blow me away, and I have no idea where my feelings really land on this thing. But I can tell that I'm pretty sure I love it. I can't give a load of backstory and talk for a long time on this guy because I haven't listened to his older stuff. So this is like a really, I'm not the person to listen to for advice on this album, but whoa. There's a lot of like walls of guitars and screaming and stuff, but it's not just like completely metal. There's a few tracks in between the metal numbers that are just like completely piano or organ or whatever that really help create peaceful moments between the pieces of mayhem. But the moments of mayhem are like somehow darkly euphoric. And they got stutter edits as well. Stutter edits! But there are a lot of tracks that sound really similar. Stop leaving out pieces of crucial information! Yeah, I could talk for like half an hour on this thing, but I don't have the time. So just to encompass everything, this album's crazy. I'm not sure how much I like it, but I think I love it. I've seen Fantana give it a 9 out of 10. Maybe with a few more listens it'll completely click and I'll absolutely love it like he does. But for now I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. And that's everything I've wanted to talk about. Oh, there is a new album from BT, but I'm gonna save a full video for that one because I've got lots to say. But I'm just a random kid on the internet, so don't take anything I say objectively, but that's all from me today, so see you next time.